Okay, people, can you hear and see me? Well, welcome to the 80s, although it's 2022, the end of it, near the end of 2022. I'm Espen Kraft, and we're going to answer some questions tonight. It's 9 p.m. here in Norway. It's pitch black outside up here in the woods. And it's a not so very pleasant minus 13 degrees Celsius. I think that's about minus 8 Fahrenheit, so it's pretty cold. And nice to see you all. Perfect picture and sound, I hear from one in the comments. That's very nice to hear. Thank you for the feedback. It's important for me to have a clear image and sound, of course, during these live streams. And this is a Q&A session, as always. Last time, I think we had a 1.5-hour session, and it was a lot of questions, and I didn't get to answer all of them either. So let's see how it goes today, and please discuss among yourselves in the comment section. That's very nice. If you have other opinions and want to talk with other people in the comments, please do so, but keep a civil tone, please. And I've had some questions in regards to the replay of the live chats, and it's like this. When you upload the live stream after it's ended onto YouTube, it takes a little while before the live chats appear in the video that is the live stream. So it might take up to 8 or 10 hours actually before the live chats appear, the comments appear in the stream as you see it later. So I've had some comments saying that I can't see the live chat. That's because you've tried to watch the playback of the live stream shortly after the stream has ended, and you have to wait a few hours before you can see the live the replay of the live chat here. And as always, I will start by answering a couple of questions that have come in throughout the week, among them on my Patreon. So I will pull up some of these questions on the screen right now, and then I'll get into the comment section here and answer some of the questions you have for me. And again, I can't answer every question, I think. So again, nothing personal. If I don't pick out your question, I try to pick out questions that are relevant and where I feel I can give you an honest and good reply that'll benefit as many people as possible. Okay, so let's see. I have a question here, which I get a lot all the time in different comments to different videos and in the direct emails, etc. And what does your setup look like for monomix, hardware, software mixers, studio monitors, etc.? And as always, I say that that is simply too big of a topic to answer in just a few lines in a comment section. And it's even too big a topic to answer here as well. That's why my next 2 videos in my series, A Song is Born, the first one coming tomorrow, episode 7 and 8, will answer all of this, my entire hardware and software setup for doing mixing, both in mono and in stereo. So that will be a total of almost 2.5 hours, or at least 2 hours, coming up in the next 2 videos on my channel. And another question I get a lot is, Espen, can you do a video presentation about this synthesizer? And they pull up the favorite synthesizer of their choice or the synthesizer they want me to do a video presentation of. And more often than not, the answer is I don't have that synthesizer. I don't have all synthesizers, of course, and I don't have access to all synthesizers made either. So sometimes I can't do a video presentation of a synth because I simply don't have it, and I don't know anyone that does either. So sometimes I don't have any videos planned because I don't see how I can make them. So that's the answer to that. And another question I got in during the week, which is also very relevant, is how can we reproduce the over-the-top use of effects like reverb on synths or vocals live without getting muddy? And boy, I've done a lot of live gigs, both as an artist and as a mix master at the other end, at the front of house. And it's not easy getting larger than life effects live on stage, because there's usually so much room ambience, and live venue speakers aren't often very forgiving when it comes to large modulated reverbs or things like that. So to get that pulled off in a convincing and good 80s way is to really have your own man behind the mixing desk that knows your song very well, that can pull up the reverb and take it back uh, in rhythm, in sync with the music and stuff like that. So if you don't have time for a good sound check, if you don't have a man of your own behind the desk at a live venue, gig, etc., it's hard to pull off those large effects on your live gig. So it takes a bit of effort to get that pulled off. So that's that. And another question I got during the week and on my Patreon, which I will answer first, is how do I make those gated snares from the 80s? And the gated snare sound of the 80s, if you think about Phil Collins in the Air Tonight, or Peter Gabriel, or a lot of other artists as well, in lots of film scores, you have gated snares. Eric Serra, who scored a lot of the Luc Besson movies, often uses a lot of gated snares in his soundtrack compositions. And today you can certainly use your software to make gated gates. You have gated snares. You have reverbs with gated effects on them. You can pull up your favorite reverb, set a long reverb time, and just put a compressor behind it in the signal chain, and just vary the threshold and release attack times, etc., to get your favorite gated sound out of that snare. In hardware, it's basically the same thing. You run your signal through a reverb of your choice, and insert a compressor or limiter after that, which cuts off the reverb tail. You can also just do a long tail on a snare in software, and just cut it off in a audio editing software, and just make your snares gated that way. It's many ways you can do this. But I guess the guy asking this is wondering how to get those authentic sounding 80s gated snares and how to make them sound good. Well, there's not an easy answer here. It's a lot of trial and error. And what I use most of the time these days is the AMS RMX 16 hardware effects unit, because it has that non-lin gated reverb algorithm that really is of the 80s and used on a lot of 80s tracks. And you can get that in software as well. I think for Universal Audio has that AMS RMX 16 software plugin and the non-lin algo. So use that. So that's the gated snare. And the last question from the last week, which I will answer here, is also very relevant, especially for someone like me who is in love with old samplers. And the question goes as follows: can you use an old sampler in real time as a preamp and bit reducer for an effect? And the answer to that is you can on some samplers, while other samplers you cannot. Most samplers require you to actually sample to get the signal in and out, with all the sampler artifacts and the bit reduction, etc., etc. Some samplers, like the Akai S612, lets you use the input gain stage, and it will output that as well. So you can use the gain stage to drive your signal. And the Akai S612 has a really gnarly preamp stage that is very good on bass, for instance, and you can record that bass with that preamp. You do not get the 12-bit sample conversion. It just runs the signal through the preamp and out again if you put it in standby mode. And the Yamaha 8 3000, which I have a video on my channel, that lets you do the whole thing. You can run the signal in and get dial in the bit reduction, the frequency band, etc., and you can record that out to a recorder if you want to, with a signal going through the entire sampler chain without actually sampling. So it depends on what sampler you use. So that's basically some of the questions I got during the week, which I felt and wanted to answer before I got into the comment section here. So let's see what you've got for me. I really dig that you play on my comments here. I see you. I went to the bottom of the comment section right now. I see you discussing the gated snare thing, and that's wonderful. More the merrier. Just comment away and agree, disagree with me. Come with your own suggestions, and many people will benefit from your answers. So please, that's something what I hoped you would do during these live streams. Discuss the topics and amongst yourselves, and just give back to the community. Great. Let me have a sip of my Dr. Pepper here. I'm not endorsed by Dr. Pepper in any way, but this is one of my favorite drinks in the world, the original classic Dr. Pepper. That's very refreshing. Okay, and again, hello to everyone popping by. This is a live Q&A session with me, Espen Kraft, in beautiful Norway at the moment, which is pitch black and very cold, but it's warm and cozy inside the studio. So let's have a look here. Let's have a look here. I see some of you are present in a much warmer climate right now than I am, and it must be very nice being in places like Florida or Australia and warm places. Here it's a lot of snow at the moment. Okay. Here's a nice one from Giddy Gavin. Hi, from Wales, United Kingdom. I would like to ask if there's a great 1980s movie you would like to have scored or written the score to. I think you would have totally succeeded at it. That's very kind of you to say. I'm not sure I would have succeeded in the actual 80s because I hadn't gained much experience in the 80s in music. But I know what you're asking, and I would have liked to score the Terminator. Although I love the Terminator theme, and everyone does, of course, and it's impossible to fathom another score to Terminator. But once the Terminator score was unknown, unwritten, and someone would have to do it, and that's a movie I would very much have liked to have written the soundtrack for. Since you're asking, so my answer tonight will be the Terminator from 1984. Thanks for the good comments on the song I played in the intro, by the way. Non-music related, but I'll answer it anyway. Where did you get that jumper? I've used this in some videos during the years, and I got this in a store in Fredrikstad, which is an hour drive from here, another town towards Oslo, the capital. And I've only seen it there at that one time. They only had one, and I bought that one. That's the one I'm wearing here. So I've never seen it anywhere else. So I'm not sure how many exist of this jumper. So good luck finding another one, but I love it. It reminds me of the breakout game for Commodore 64. When you had this ball that you could play bounce off a bar here that would ruin the different structures, and you could score points if you remember that. I think it was Breakout or Arkanoid on the in the arcade. Correct me if I'm wrong in the comment section. So, okay, let's pull up this one. Fresh Like Mentos is asking, Mr. Kraft, how did you come up with I'm Just Like Ronaldo, the song? What was the inspiration for this song? When are you going to do I'm Taller Than Messi? Very relevant question, since it's the World Cup and everything. Portugal is out. Ronaldo is out. Messi is still in. for Argentina. And the song "I'm Just Like Ronaldo," well, that originated from the video where I had to make a song using only the UVI Emulator 2 plugin software, if you remember that. So I made that song when I was working with that software, that plugin. And originally it was supposed to be called "I'm Just Like Rambo." But Rambo is only two syllables. Is that it? Rambo, while Ronaldo was three. So I needed three to get the rhythm going. So I just, yeah, thought about it a while, and I decided to call it "I'm Just Like Ronaldo" instead. And I had to alter the lyrics a bit to make it fit. So that's the story behind that. And I'm not sure a lot of people got the joke really for that song. Personally, I'm not trying to be Ronaldo, but the character in the song is trying to be like Ronaldo. So there's a big difference there. So that's that. So let's see. Here's an interesting and relevant question. Not because I get this actual question a lot, but the idea behind it I get a lot. From Dr. Dog Toffee. Evening, Espen. Any chance of you doing a collaboration with Claudio from Dr. Mix? And the answer to that is no. Not because it's Dr. Mix. I would have said no, no matter what artist or other YouTuber you'd pull up. And the reason is that I don't collaborate on making music with anyone. I make my music alone, and I really dislike making music with other people. I can certainly play a live gig with other people as musicians at the live gig, but I won't make any music with other people. I have a enormous ownership to the music I make, and I wouldn't let anyone near my music at all in terms of ideas, tips, or tricks, usually. So the answer to that is no, because of those reasons. Not because I'm right in everything or other people won't have good ideas. Sometimes they might even have better ideas than mine for the development of a song, but I just don't like it. And I never do things I don't like. That's a mantra in my life. If I don't like it, I won't do it. Period. So that's that question answered. So let's see. Gordon asks me, the first moment as you thought electronic music is my thing. Well, I never thought that really at all. I told my story earlier about how I got involved with music, first by playing some Yamaha electronic organs in the very early 80s. And that was just, is it happenstance or just by chance, really, that I started doing that. So I never thought electronic music is my thing. It was just the natural progression from those Yamaha organs over to keyboards and synthesizers, and I just got that interest going. I never thought to myself that I'm an electronic music artist at all. I really don't think that now either. I'm a musician, a producer, arranger, and composer, and I happen to use electronics to make my points across musically. And again, if I was left to myself on a desert island, I would never take a synth as an only instrument. I would take a piano, acoustic piano, or guitar. So the most important part of music to me is to make the songs, not the gear itself. Question from Synthcat. Have you anything modular in the studio? No, I don't like modular setups at all in terms of synthesizers. I'm a chord-driven melody guy, and modular synths doing monophonic sounds and usually only effect noises and beeps and plops and things like that isn't really my style. I don't listen to it much, and I certainly don't want to make it. I have an enormous respect for everyone that does, and it's just not my thing really. So modular synths or setups, not for me. Here's one. Espen Kraft, you did a short video about Thompson twins some time ago. Correct? A long time ago. Do you have any plans to do videos discussing other specific 80s acts? And the question is yes, I actually have several videos of that, both planned and partially recorded as well. I simply haven't got the time to finish them, so I have more of these videos hopefully coming up soon. I cannot say exactly when, but it's a very fun thing to do, and I look forward to doing more of those. So let's see. Yeah, here's one from Christopher. Will there be a studio tour 2023? By the way, the new album is fantastic. Enjoy it very much. Very many thanks, Christopher. I have studio tour videos for 21 and 22, I think, and 23 is coming up. I'm not sure I have all that much to show you after the next two videos in my series coming up this week. I show a lot of things there. Maybe I'll do some early in 2023. Let's see what happens. I do have some interesting things behind the camera right now, which you can't see, which I've not shown in any video. So I might do it. Might do it if there's enough interest for it. I see there's other people enjoying Dr. Pepper here as well. That's very nice. Very nice. Again, I'm not promoting Dr. Pepper in any particular way. I just like it, and I have to drink something during these live streams because my throat gets thirsty. So I decided on that tonight instead of water, which I drink most of the time. Here's an interesting one from Juan Rubio. Greetings from California. Would you ever considering using a talkbox, vocoder, or some sort of voice modulator on a future original song? I have used a vocoder on several tracks already. Midnight Drive Part 1. I used one. I used one in on the Golden Boy, my most popular track. And I used it on Future Arrive, the song Future Arrive. So I have used it. And it has to fit really with my vision for the song if I'm going to use a talkbox vocoder or voice modulator. So and I did it on the Howard Jones "What Is Love" cover as well. So I do it occasionally, vocoders or talkboxes. So check back on those tracks if you're interested. Okay. Hi, Espen. Have you ever used any 88 key workstations? And of course, in the 90s, I used a lot of workstations. I talked a little about that last time. If I'm to mention one in particular, it will have to be the Kurzweil K2500, 2500. The Kurzweil K2500. I used that a lot in the mid 90s as a workstation, both in the studio and live. It was never mine. I had borrowed it from a good friend of mine, and I liked it a lot. And I've used others as well. I never use them anymore now. I haven't used them for 20 years, but in the 90s, I used them a lot. Another question from the synth addict, Espen Kraft. Is there any synthesis type you haven't used yet or don't use on purpose or don't like, and why? And I use them all, he says. And I think I've covered all of the synthesis types in my videos, apart from the modular setups as such. Additive synthesis on the Kawaii, for instance, I I've never shown the K5000 on the channel, but I've used a little bit of additive synthesis when I've used the Kawai K3, and I've used additive synthesis when I've used the Korg DSS1. Subtractive synthesis, of course, as most synths uses subtractive synthesis to make their sounds. Sampling, if you consider that a type of synthesis, and even the name escapes me at the moment. FM, of course, use that a lot. Although I've not done any FM clinic type videos on the channel, but I've used FM synthesis a lot and done a little bit on the video showing how to manipulate the algorithms and operators. I have another video already uploaded to YouTube, unpublished, which will feature some FM as well. So I like all of the synthesis types, and I use them where I see it fit, where the sounds can really enhance the production I'm working on. As always, I'm not a gear addict as such. I'm not addicted to any types or the synthesis. I'm more of a sound sculpture. I sculpture sounds to fit within an arrangement of a song. It's always the song, what benefits the song. I never sit down to play with the synthesizer just to make random sounds. I always sit down with the synthesizer because I have a mission. I'm out to create that particular sound, and I pull out the tool I think is best for that task. So that's that. 6128 Plus asks, what's your opinion about the Korg M1? Of course, the M1 is a classic synth from the early 80s, late 80s, early 90s. Still relevant in many ways. Some signature sounds that you can hear still, that you've always heard from the moment the M1 was released. And I like it. Can't say I love it, but I like it. I like some of the signature sounds from the M1. And of course, I will have to answer this question from Tommy Lee. Dear Espen, thank you for your amazing cassette Dreams and the album. Thank you. How do you improve your skills in composition and arrangement? And that's a very interesting question and very relevant, because that's the topics I care about the most, and it's not easily answered because there are still people that hate my songs and really dislike what I do. So there will always be opinion about a certain composition. People will like this, some will like that, and some won't like either. So who's to say what is a good or bad composition as such? But if you want to improve in any skill, you have to do it again and again and again. As a football coach, I try to inspire my group of players to do the same things again and again and again and again to hone in on their skills. You have to do things a lot to be good at it. And that's also the thing about composition and arrangement. You have to listen to a lot of songs. You have to study the songs. You have to listen again, study, make your own things. And slowly you'll develop your skills, hopefully, if you have talent. And you'll be a better musician, better composer, better arranger, etc. if you do the legwork, so to speak. So not easily answered, but the most relevant answer is just do it. Here's one from, it's either Peter Larsen in Scandinavian or Peter Larsen if you're from the US, for instance. I don't know. Hi, Espen. What are some of your favorite delays, pedal and rack? And that question involves a lot of different answers depending on if it's a delay, pedal, or rack. But I've shown a couple of my favorite pedals in the video series A Song Is Born lately. I've used those pedals because they are my favorite pedals. Otherwise, I would have used other pedals. And one is the MXR Dynacomp compression pedal from the early 80s. At least the one I have is from the late 70s. because it adds something special to the attack of the guitar sound that is very 80s to me. So I use the MXR Dynacomp on stuff like that. And I also love the Boss CE2 chorus pedal. I think that's one of the most lovely choruses you can use on a mono signal source. So I have that and use that a lot. So that's pedals for you. Delays, well, the TC2290 is probably my favorite delay, hardware delay. And rack, well, there's so many. The AMS RMX16 reverb, the Lexicon hardware reverbs from the 80s, and the Roland Space Echo is one I really like. So there's a lot of things I like, really. Yeah, let's see. From Tommy Lee again, have you any tips and tricks for creating new patches on retro synths like the Yamaha DX7 or Roland D50? Well, there's not easy to make new, unheard sounds on classic synths like the D50 or DX7 or the Juno synths or stuff like that. There's really not much more coverage you can do with those synths except for variations. And variations can be critical and very important, but I'm not sure you can do a lot of new stuff with those classic synths. I did a patch bank for the Roland D50 a couple of years ago, where I only used S plus S structures. That means I didn't use any of the PCM samples. I used the D50 as a analog synth. I only used the analog engine of that synth, so to speak, the virtual analog section. And that was something I felt was lacking on the market, not something many people did. Always use those PCM attack samples, which the D50 is famous for. So that way I felt I broke a little bit of new ground with the D50. The DX7 has a lot of potential, but I'm not sure how you can really harness something really revolutionary out of the DX7 now, unless you stack sounds, you layer sounds, etc., in a production or arrangement. And on that note, I'll answer this one from Tlaso. I can't pronounce it. I'm sorry. But anyways, what is your favorite FM synth? And of course, I'll have to answer the DX7, the original one, at least the original one in terms of commercial release. And that will always be my favorite FM synth. Although I really like the Yamaha FS1R module, which came in around 98. I have a video on it on my channel. I can't remember exactly the year it came out now, late 90s. And that's a really monster of a FM synth. So DX7 and the FS1R as a runner-up. So let's see. There's a lot of questions here, and I love it. Unfortunately, I won't be able to answer all of them. Here's a nice one from LB. Hello, Espen. Have you ever been to Italy to breathe the Italo disco vibe? Cheers from Italy. I've never been to Italy. I'm sorry to say. I would love to visit. So many places in Italy I would like to go, actually, and of course I'd pick up some Italo disco vibes if I went there. So answer is no, I've never been to Italy, but I would sure love to visit. Absolutely. Things like what was my first synth and stuff like that, I've answered that in previous live streams, so you have to go back and check that. Some of these questions come up here because people probably haven't watched those earlier live streams, but I answered a lot of questions there as well, so I won't answer the same question twice. Synth I regret selling and stuff like that, answered that before. This one, Espen, have you ever played Kawaii K1? Well, I have a Kawaii K1. I have actually made a video about the Kawaii K1, so watch that. Interesting one from Monsieur C64. Most overrated 80s synth in your opinion? Actually, when I come to think of it, I think I've answered that question before, haven't I? Um, Overrated 80s synth? Well, I don't know. Many people will say the DX7 or D50, perhaps. That's not my answer. I'm not sure actually what overrated 80s synth comes to mind. They're all tools. Sometimes that tool is necessary for that job, and sometimes that tool is necessary for another job. So I'd rather talk about underrated synths, underrated tools in the 80s, which I have a video on. I'm not sure I have a answer for you on that one. From Kent Landberg, hi, are you going to see Depeche Mode in Oslo next year? I will definitely not go to see Depeche Mode live anymore. To me, Depeche Mode died when Alan Wilder left, not because I'm a Alan Wilder fanboy, but because he was part of what made Depeche Mode magical in the 80s and early 90s. And I'm sad to say that Depeche Mode now is just a fraction of what they used to be. I don't like how they sound at all, really. And I don't think Martin Gore's compositions or arrangements now is it doesn't appeal to me now. So I will definitely spend money and time to see them now with their drum setup and stuff like that. So no, question is definitely I will not. The Jupiter 8 is overrated. I see some saying in the comment section, and I can certainly understand where you're coming from. I even have a video on my channel asking the same question, come to think of it. I don't think it's overrated, but it's overpriced. That's more the truth here, in my opinion. Here's a good one from Christopher. Sometimes I will answer questions, multiple questions from one guy. That's again nothing personal against you, whose questions I don't answer. I just try to pull out relevant questions that haven't been answered before. So please bear with me on this, even though your question will not get answered this time. Christopher asks, may I ask what do you do to evaluate, review your songs at production end? Do you have any kind of ritual, hearing it in your car over headphones or some 80s gear, show a family member, etc.? And no, 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 and no. I don't have any ritual at all. I know when the song is done. After doing this for so many years, I know when it's done. I don't need to hear it in my car. I don't need to hear it on another system. I don't need to play it to a friend, and I don't need to play it to a family member. I just know when it's done. And that doesn't mean 10 years later I won't listen back and think, why didn't I do that, or why didn't I do that? I think that's only natural. You hear things as you've progressed and went forward on things you did back in the day. That I do, but I don't have anything special to do when the song is finished. When it's finished, it's finished, and I just move on. So again, nothing wrong with doing all those things, and I'll actually get back to that in the 2 videos coming up this week on how I finished the song in the series A Song Is Born. And the only thing I do is that I am very particular about the mono and stereo while I'm mixing. I check a lot in mono, listen a lot in mono, for phasing and other things, and that's the only thing I do. And that doesn't really have anything to do with when the song is finished in terms of arrangement. That's more of, on the sound itself. So no ritual like that. Here's an interesting one. If you could get any synth you want, which one would you absolutely not get? Well, that's interesting. Maybe if someone leaves a synth at my doorstep, I probably wouldn't throw it out. I would most likely take it in and see what it was. And if I had never played it before or had an experience with it, I would definitely try it. I think so. Uh, I can't say that I would absolutely not get a synth, but there are synths that I won't spend my money on now because they cost too much, really. And the Jupiter 8 is one synth. Of course, I would not pay $40,000 for a synth now. I would not do that. Here's one from the Green Thumb Network. Have you used a synth guitar or one of the air-driven synth saxophones? Uh, I've certainly used keytars before, if that's what you mean. But the air-driven synth saxophone, I don't play any brass or reed type of instruments, so I haven't used any of the synth-based Akai or Yamaha air-driven synths either. I used the breath controller for the DX line, of course, but that's probably not what you're asking. The Astro Kid, do you still have your first demo track from your early days? Unfortunately, I do not have the first couple of years worth of demos. I had cassettes. I just don't know where they went. So I'm sorry to say, I do not. The earliest demos I have is probably from 87 or so, again on cassettes. I have lots of demos here and there, and I've tried to make a copy of everything I've done after that. So I am pretty well served in terms of storage of old stuff. And occasionally, I actually play demos on the channel as the exit music when everyone has left the video already. So I'm not sure if anyone's actually heard it, but I often play old demos or variations uh, as the exit track on my videos. Here's again about the guitars I used in the guitar segment of my video series. I'd like to ask you regarding recording guitars, as in the guitar chapter of the recent series of the production of your song. Just as you recorded it directly, would you also consider using an amp? And the answer is no. If I'm doing pop, straight pop in an 80s style, I would not use a amp. We didn't use amps back in the 80s when we recorded the guitars that way. It was always DI'd, direct inputs. And we might use the Rockman X100 as a amplifier. In that sense, it's really a headphone uh, training device, but it has a really nice output. So always DI'd guitars when you're doing pop in an 80s style or even modern style. No need to use an amp unless you're doing rock or guitar based harder pop, in my opinion, anyways. And that's why we're here to listen to my opinions, I guess. So let's see. Let's see. Many thanks for all the good comments here. I'm just browsing through this quickly now to find relevant questions. Here's a nice one from Reed Hawk, or Reid Hauke if you're Norwegian. Do you think preamps make a difference when recording synths? And I did a video a while back where I showed you how you could get a sort of a more huge sound out of your synths using preamps and a kind of special recording techniques where you use the microphone inputs of your preamps because you run your synth through a direct box first, and from there into the mic preamps of the preamp box unit to get a huge sound. And sometimes I do that again to transform or saturate the sound of the synths. If I'm going for a more cleaner sound, I'll use a just regular DI input of a preamp. The first example was a sort of Neve 1073 clone preamp to give it that British saturated smeared sound for the synths that sometimes are a good choice. At other times, if you want a more hard hitting American sound coming out of your synths with a more bang in the sound, I might use some API preamps instead. And I have videos of that coming up as well. I always have a 20 to 30 videos in the making at any given time, and one of those videos will show you some differences in terms of preamps when recording synths. So that's definitely something I would do, but not always. It all depends on what sound I'm going for. Here's a nice one, which I think is relevant. What is, for you, based on experience, the biggest mistake that indie producer artists are doing producing music? And I assume you mean less known producers, or uh, maybe even bedroom producers that do gigs for other people, even though they're small in terms of uh, familiar appearance or known to the world. And it depends really. If I'm approached by an artist or a band to produce a song of theirs, and I'm definitely not a household name, even though I've worked with this my whole life. I never did get any 80s hits or million selling platinum albums, but I've done a lot of work regardless, because most of the time you don't get a million uh, platinum selling albums, or hit singles, so but you still do the work as a producer. And if I'm approached by a artist or a band to produce a song, it is my duty and my goal is to help them develop their song in the way that represent them the best, in the best possible way. That's my job. My job is not to inflict my own personal style or preference onto them, unless they want me to do that. And I think a lot of producers maybe get that wrong. They either do too much of themselves or too little. It's all about communication with the artist or the label or the band, what they really want out of the gig. So when I'm approached by artists and bands, I always try to figure out why exactly they came to me, what they want from me, because often they're unable to express really what they want. They just ask me and say, "Hey, Espen, can you produce this? Can you arrange that? Can you help us do this?" And I'm really trying to get out of them, harness their expectations and what they really want from me as a producer. So good communication might sometimes be what's lacking in the initial phase when taking on artists or bands. So I would say communication can often be what goes wrong in the beginning and end up with a client that is not totally happy with what you did for them. So maybe that's something you should think about. Here's one from Chloe. Hi, Chloe. Espen, what are your thoughts on the Cheetah SX16 sampler? I had one back in the day. It was quite nice. And I remember the Cheetah very well, but I can't say I've had that much experience with it, so I don't have any strong opinion on it. That's definitely one of the samplers I would like to get my hands on now and run through some tests and see how it does really. So I would love to have some thoughts on it. Unfortunately, I don't have any strong opinions about it right now, but maybe in a year or so we can talk about this again. Here's a very relevant question. Again, a little bit from the good doctor. From Showtech Music, hello, Mr. Kraft. Simple question: your favorite Roland keybed or any other synth manufacturer? And that's right. My favorite keybed of all time is what Roland did with their synths in the late 80s. Everything from the Juno, Alpha Juno, the D50, the W30, which I have right here. Those keybeds are by far the best keybeds I've ever played on, and I always try to play on these if I can. If I'm doing synth sounds, synth bass, synth brass, strings, stuff like that, I always try to use keybeds like this for that when I do the recordings. If I'm doing piano sounds, electric piano or acoustic piano, I prefer the KX88 Yamaha Master Keyboard. That's why I have that to do stuff like that. And in videos, I might use the KX88 for other synths as well, other sounds as well, because it's more practical to use in videos. But I really like the old keybeds from Yamaha, from Roland from the late 80s, definitely. So that's good. Lots of questions here, guys. Thank you so much. Again, something that goes into the creative process. Hi, Espen, do you feel your inspiration has changed over time? Or are you still as inspired to make new music as when you were younger? For me, it really differs with time. Well, we're all different and we have different life situations, and things can get in the way and things can really enhance different emotions, etc. And no guarantees in life. But I can certainly say that for me personally, I'm very inspired. I wake up every day thankful and grateful that I'm alive. And my, not necessarily my first thought, because I don't think about music all the time, far from it. But I'm always inspired to make new stuff. And I have lots of ideas at all times, which I would like to expand upon. And that's maybe just how I'm built. I'm not very optimistic of nature at all, actually. So I don't think it has something to do with that. I'm rather the opposite. Uh, but I always have some sort of creative inspiration going on inside that I can act upon in the studio in terms of making new music. But again, it's different from people, person to person, and what you're going through in life. I've always made my most upbeat, positive songs when I've been most down, and when I'm very happy, I can make my saddest song. So I like to do the opposite. I do a George Costanza there, do the opposite. And this one from Philip Pendleton. Espen, what is your favorite tracks on Dreams? He's referring to my album Dreams, which is out now on the streaming media. All the physical releases on cassette has been sold out, so I don't have any more to ship out, but it's on the streaming media and Bandcamp as well. And my favorite tracks, well, I find it very odd actually when looking at the stats on Spotify, at least, that the most by far popular track on my album Dreams right now is the second track called the Neon Riders. And I'm beginning to think it's because it's called Neon Riders that most people maybe listen to that first because of the title, which is ironic, by the way, because I try to steer clear of those synthwave cliche names for my tracks, but I ended up calling that Neon Riders as well. And it's actually maybe the track on the album where very little is happening in terms of the arrangement. Is pretty the same throughout the entire length of that song, except for the final song. So Neon Riders being the most popular so far is strange to me, but but it is what it is. It's certainly not my favorite on the album. I will say that my favorite track of mine on the album will have to be Something's Awake, because I'm using only the 6 track from Sequential Circuit on that one. And to me, that's basically my go at some of the Terminator album, which I answered earlier in the live stream. When I made that track, Something's Awake, using the sequential 6 track, I had the Terminator movie in mind. Although the album in itself is not inspired by the Terminator movie. If some of you have watched this live stream before, I've told you that the album is inspired by my favorite movie, and that is As a Whole, and that is not the Terminator movie. Just so I'm about to say that, but I had the Terminator in mind when I made that Something's Awake track, because that's an older track. So that's that. Let's see. We've almost completed an hour here, so I won't go on for another hour. So I'll pick out some more questions here. One from Mana. Espen, do you think it's worth to get the Poly 61 if you already have a JX3P? And the Poly 61, the Korg Poly 61 and the 3P sounds very different, and they can really complement each other. They're both a 2 oscillator synth per voice, but they don't sound the same at all. So they can definitely complement each other. So it's definitely worth getting a Poly 61 if you have a 3P, or vice versa, in my opinion. So that's my answer to that. This is also something I've answered before, I think, if my memory serves me right. From Jacob, I notice you don't feature many Moog synthesizers on your channel. Do you have a favorite Moog? Well, I did a video some time ago on the Memory Moog, which I liked a lot. I do like the Mini Moog, although I'm not a big fan of the Mini Moog, or Moogs in general, because they don't do all that much in terms of sounds for the type of music I make. When it came to from the mid 80s and towards the 90s, it was really about hybrid synths, digital synths, and sampling, and that's where I basically want to take my arrangements and productions towards that hybrid synth sound that dominated from 84 and through the rest of the 80s. And analog synths don't have that much of a place in mid 80s chart pop synth based music. It was all about sampling, and you could definitely sample the Moogs and layer that with other types of sounds to get new types of sounds to use in your arrangements. So the Moogs are really from a era which I don't identify myself with that much in terms of production and sound. So that's probably one of the reasons. Another one is that I don't know many people that has all of the different Moogs. So I would definitely not say no to borrow a Moog synth from anyone, but as of right now, I don't know many people locally that has one for me to borrow. And like I told earlier, I can't drive around half the country to borrow synths, it has to be within a reasonable reach from where I live, and that sort of uh, makes it somewhat less probable to get hands on all those most exotic synths, although Moogs are not exotic in that sense. Yeah, the list goes on here. Interesting one from Constellation D. Do you prefer all drum computer or software drums? I answered that sort of in an early live stream. But I can use both. I like to use drum machines if I can, synced up to a MIDI clock to record them live onto a track. That's very good. But sometimes I use samples, and I've always sampled my drum machine, so I have my own custom library of sampled drum sounds, which I use a lot in my music. Espen, do you listen to your own old music or ever remix or re-record something from Mac Expert 74? I do listen to my old stuff occasionally because I know I have a lot of demos and sketches from old, which sometimes I pull out and listen to extract maybe ideas I can work upon or just finish old things that I have left unfinished. I like to finish things, but that's not always the case. Although I do more often than not, finish what I start. Remixing, maybe not remixing, but I sometimes have pulled out old mixes and remixed them sort of with new EQ or compression or reverbs, etc. Not often, but sometimes. So the answer is yes, I sometimes do that. From Elliot Sykes, VCO or DCO, do you have a preference? And that old debate about VCOs versus DCOs, and DCOs aren't analog and all that. That's totally baloney. A VCO or DCO doesn't really matter. If the sound that comes out sounds good, it's good. Although, like I've always said, and my mantra, the journey has to be fun as well. That's a very important step for me. I have to have fun using a certain tool, but that never boils down to if it's a VCO or DCO. I like both in equal amounts. Robin Chan, do you use limiters on your 80s sound when mastering? And Robin, episode number 9 of A Song Is Born, coming out soon, is all about mastering. My mastering chain, both in hardware and in software. When I master my songs or master songs for other people, I can either do it totally out of the box with hardware units or totally in the box with software. And I'll show it in that video coming up before Christmas, I think, or at least very soon thereafter. And the answer is yes, I do use limiters when mastering. You have to. Yeah. I thought I saw something here about. Let's see. This one from Soapil. Espen, time to do an early Kraft 1987 cassette. I'd buy one. That's nice of you to say. A cassette release of demos and the Espen Kraft music from 1987 will probably not see the light of day anytime soon. But I thank you for your confidence and willingness to buy that cassette. This question is actually very, very relevant for reasons I cannot disclose right now, but I will eventually. So you can just start to speculate. What do you think about the newer classical synths from Sequential, like the Prophet 6 or OB6? And the answer to that is I like them both. And I think of new stuff that has come out in the last 10 years or so. These are definitely among the ones I really like. Not because they're analog or things like that. I just like them because they offer a nice, solid package of classic design with a modern interface and a roadworthiness that sometimes is necessary for gigging artists that don't want to take out their vintage Prophets or Oberheims, because that is really a recipe for disaster. You can take out some vintage synths, and some vintage synths are more suitable to live gigging than others. So in that sense, I think the Prophet 6 and the OB6 are great examples of classics done today, which fills a lot of needs, I think, in the music world in terms of synths and stuff like that. So good question, and very relevant, and I'll answer that more in detail later by showing you some stuff I have um, going on in the future. Okay, we'll have to scroll down the comments here. Way more comments and questions today than it was last time. So here's a actually nice one, interesting one from Lady Aptitude. You are the 80s, but also sometimes the 90s. That's true. Sometimes I are well into the 90s. What is the cutoff point for you? What's the last classic piece of gear for you? Well, I have done something from the 2000s as well. I did the John Bowen Solaris, and I recently did the MFB Dominion 1. So it's really not that. It's just that when I make my music, which is basically 80s type of music and arrangements and sounds, when you pull out a lot of synths from the 90s and 2000, you can clearly hear the sound has changed somewhat to more edgy perhaps, or you just have a type of texture in the timbres that really aren't that 80s. And that's really the reason why I don't have many in videos, or I don't have many at all actually in the studio, which I use because of that. It doesn't give me that 80s texture in its sound. So some exceptions, of course, but that's basically the thing. And I did a lot of music in the 90s, techno stuff, trance stuff towards the end of the 90s. And I did so much paid work in that genre in the 90s that I really had enough of it, really. So I have no great desire to go back there in terms of music making now. Maybe that'll change. Someone is saying in the 90s is the new 80s or something like that. That there's more and more 90s inspired music coming in movies and new artists, new acts, etc. But I won't jump on that, I think, at all, because I'm in love with the 80s still. Peter Kuhn, hi Espen, if you were to choose a type of effect to define as the secret sauce of 80s retro sound, what would that be? Of course, the gated reverb we talked about earlier in this live stream is one. Gated reverb is really the 80s. You can't go wrong with gated reverb if you're doing any type of 80s sound. But also a lot of chorus on a vocal can give you a nice 80s feel. Having the snare drum very high in the mix, again with reverb on it, is also a tell that it's a 80s type of production. So lots of things really that can be the secret sauce. And if you use all of them at the same time, then you have the 80s for sure. I'll have to answer this one from Chloe again. Espen Kraft, if money was no object, ultimate studio hardware. Uh, if money was no object, I'd definitely have a bigger studio room, maybe a complex or a house of its own, and I would definitely want to go back to mixing on a large SSL console. There's nothing in the world that gives me more pleasure than sitting behind a SSL 4000 or something like that and doing my mixes on that with a big patch-based setup and stacks of reverbs and compressors and EQs and stuff like that. So definitely, but the SSL 4000 or an SSL console is what I'd consider my ultimate hardware in a studio setup. Espen, have you ever think about starting your own label? Well, I have my own label. I've been releasing my music on my own label for decades now. It's called Resolute Records. It's even here on the cassette, Resolute Records. That is my label. But I only release my own music on that label. So if you're meaning if I start a label and releasing other people on that label, that's totally out of the question. But I do release my own stuff on my own label called Resolute Records. This one I've answered in the past as well. Espen from Flat Sun, yes. Were you ever into demo scene and or Amiga music? And the answer is a big no. I was never interested in the demo scene or the Amiga. At the time, the Atari ST was the music computer of choice for any pro studio. And by the time the Amiga entered the scene, I was done with my Commodore 64 days. And I went straight onto the Atari because then I was into the pro music world. And in the pro music world, the Amiga had no place, not because it was a bad computer, far from it. It was a very good computer for games and the demo scene, but not in the pro music studio world. So I skipped that part. The sweater I'm using had no impact or part in the design of my the logo for the new album. And actually in episode number 10, the final episode in my series, I go through my thought process when designing cover art and graphics and stuff like that for my music, because that's part of the video series. I'm showing the whole thing from start to finish, and the finished stuff is uploading your music with graphic arts onto the streaming platform. So I will talk about how I think about graphics art in that 10th episode. Someone's asking me about Kajagoogoo here. I won't pull that up on the screen because I've answered that before, but if I do something like this, that's Kajagoogoo. White feathers back there on the shelf. That's maybe it's something you've seen already in the stream while we're asking. Very underrated band, by the way. And someone saying comments. It disappeared. It disappeared. I was just reading something and it just disappeared. Okay. That's okay. Let's see what we got here. Lots and lots of comments. Very, very nice. Very, very nice. I've never used any tracker software for arranging my music. Thanks for the question, Heller1. No, that's related to the Amiga question just a few minutes ago. Tracker software never interested me at all, actually, and it doesn't interest me now either. There's been lots of good work done with tracker software, but it never appealed to me. I'm not structured in that way at all when it comes to making music. I sit down with a piano to make my songs, and I have to build them up using a MIDI sequencer if I'm doing any sequencing or layering in arrangement in MIDI first. This one is cool from Mac Expert again. Are there any 80s synth-based Norwegian bands not internationally well known that you like? And there are actually several synth-based Norwegian acts besides Røyksopp and uh, people like that. Uh, Many locally based bands from Norway use synths as their musical expression, and I will dig out some names and links for you in a later live stream, or maybe in a comment to this live stream, where you can check out some bands with their links that I think are worth checking out if you're interested in that. So that's a very nice question. Thanks for that, and I'll try to dig up some names and links for you and put in the comments to this live stream. Maybe not straight away, but check back after a while to see if I have some names for you. And here's a nice one. We'll put this to an end pretty soon, this live stream. Do the new 6-channel SSL mixers come any near a real large mixer? And I use two SSL 6 mixers, not the big 6, but the original ones. And I have two of those, which I'm going to go through in the next couple of videos in my series. So I'll answer this short. And of course, in terms of inputs and routing flexibility and all that, they of course cannot touch a large SSL console. But that's really not why I got those, because I don't have enough gear to really hook up to a larger mixer anyways. So I got these two because they'll fit right into the output I have. But the sound is really good. It has lots of headroom. It has a great flexibility, being a small mixer, and you can really crank up the bus compressor and get that SSL bus compressor sound within reasonable limits, because you don't have all the adjustments as you have on a real bus compressor. That's why I have another SSL bus compressor as well. But I really like the sound of those small SSL mixers, and I think it's close to a large mixer console in many ways. And I couldn't find any small format mixer that suited my needs better than those SSL 6 mixers. So that's why I have them. And this is also very relevant, which I will also answer in the next two videos. Do you think that the geometry of your room impacts the quality of your mix masters? And the short answer is no, it will not affect my mix or masters if I mix at a low volume and know my room very well, and have I will say experience in judging frequencies in the room with your ears and stuff like that. Then the geometry of the room will not impact my mixes or masters in this room here. But I cannot blast the mixes out. Then it won't be any good. So I know my room, I know my music, I know my sounds, and I know my speakers. And I mix a lot in mono, and I mix at a moderate to low volume. And I've done so for many years, and that's why how this room is constructed does not affect my mixes, which I'm doing at the moment. From Paul DeMelto, why is the JV880 so dope, Espen? Is there analog filters in there? There are no analog filters in the JV880. And I like it, and I think it's the best Roland JV Rampler to get because of its what I would say cinematic low end. if I'm doing a song where I need cinematic low end strings with bass in them, the JV880 is definitely a synth I go to. I don't think there's very little in terms of synth that can match the cinematic low end of the JV880, and it has internal electronics and things going on that really sets it apart from a lot of the other JV modules that came later. I'm talking about the low end here. Okay, I think we'll have to cut it short here. There's lots of questions here which I won't be able to answer right now, and I thank you for those questions. And next time we'll do a live stream. Just pull out those questions again, and maybe I'll answer them. Questions sent to me on my Patreon will always get answered first in the live streams. You know that by now. So that's also a sure way of getting your questions answered in these live streams. And next Monday, I will not do a live stream. I'm taking a Christmas vacation from live streams now. But, and just let me get this date right. I will do a live stream between Christmas and New Year's Eve, probably the 29th, same time as today, where I will invite a special guest, and the two of us will host this live stream, or I will host it with him as my guest, and we'll talk about different things. And there will also be possible to answer questions from you in that live stream. Please watch the channel and check for updates on that live stream. I will announce it a day or so in advance, so you'll be able to book it into your busy Christmas schedule. And I have some videos left to release. The song from the video series, A Song Is Born, it's called Time, and that will be released a couple of days before Christmas as well on the streaming platform. So you'll be able to hear the song in its final form before the series has ended, actually. So I look forward to showing you that. And there's lots of things happening before Christmas on the channel as well, but there will not be any live streams. So if I don't catch you in the videos, I just want to wish you all a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. And if you're watching the channel, I'll probably greet you there as well sometimes before Christmas on in a video. It's been my pleasure to having you all on the channel tonight. And again, sorry I couldn't answer all those questions, but I hope to get new opportunities later. So thank you all, and good night. Cheers. Just one last thing. I've had a helper helping me during these two last live streams, including today, and he shall remain faceless. But my 11-year-old son, he's keeping me in check in checking all the comments and giving me hints and pointers during these live streams. So he goes under the name Metal Skeleton. So Metal Skeleton, thank you for helping me out in these live streams. And now I can say to you all, cheese.